Something feels different, it's now coming into view. With every passing season, like a seed it grows. I found another reason why I had to let you go. Just reflections of our past. In retrospect, we gave it all we had. In retrospect, it was more than enough. But as we grew, we lost touch of what we knew. In retrospect, we had it all. If your memory could warn us of what's to come, I wouldn't trade a moment of what's been done. It's all the small reminders on my morning drive. Our story hasn't written the book of you and I. Just reflections of our past. In retrospect, we gave it all we had.
Hello, Jamie, what's
How
up?
you doing? How's everything?
Good. How are you doing?
Look at that professional compound you got going on there. I love it, man.
Oh, I'm glad you think this is professional. Fantastic. I've done it. I've fooled you well.
No, man, you are a pro's pro. How's everything, Ari? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm heading to New York tomorrow, so I'm just kind of getting ready for this trip. But yeah, everything is going well.
Is that your first time taking a flight in a while, or are you like a casual traveler during this time?
No, I have not flown since the pandemic hit. So
Wow.
I don't know what to expect necessarily. I'm definitely double masking. And I will yeah, this is it's a work trip, and I think, we haven't heard too many crazy stories about it being too unsafe flying. So and I've had a lot of friends that have flown during this time, and so just taking all the precautions, doing a bunch of tests, all that stuff. So yeah.
I think I agree with that. Just before we get to your great story, I think the flights per se, like the actual flying part, has felt great.
Yeah.
The airport 50-50. So no need to arrive there 2 hours before or any of that. That kind of thing. You can just
intentionally we're flying out of Burbank, which is the smaller airport in LA, just to make sure that we kind of keep it to the smaller side as well.
I love it, Ari. Well, listen, obviously, let me introduce you to my audience. Ari Herstand, entrepreneur, musician, educator, author of the Amazon best-selling book, How to Make It in the New Music Business. And you have a new album, Like Home, coming up on April 9th, which the single is already out, Ari. So such a fascinating guy, so many projects going on. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Ari. So let me start with this. I mean, before we get to the meat of the music and all that, I mean, you've done it all. And everything from such a high level, Ari. In research, we realized, so I felt like, we have to ask you, what is the secret to your productivity? Is it simple as like your diet, sleep, or is it like organization? What is it? Like, how do you do it?
Well, it's, I think it honestly just comes down to my passion, the grit and drive. I don't have a crazy diet. I don't have any, early morning routines. I don't have like the Tim Ferriss "What's your morning routine" thing. It's like there's nothing that interesting or secretive about what I do. I guess throughout the entire course of my career, no matter what I'm working on, is I don't really allow roadblocks to deter me. So if there's ever anything that I come up against, whether it was in my music career or whether it's in the business side or anything that I'm doing, I always find a way around that roadblock. And I think it's just why my productivity I suppose just comes from my curiosity and my passion and the drive. And I set up these goals that I'm looking to achieve, and I stop at nothing. And so I suppose it's Just a combination of a little bit of my insanity and just my overall just my passion for everything that
Your
I'm doing.
hunger. You have a great hunger, you know.
Yeah.
That's I love it. I love it, Ari. Great stuff. So obviously you're from Minneapolis, from Minnesota, and right?
So I started my music career in Minneapolis. I spent many years there. My
Okay.
music career started in Minneapolis. I
Your
actually grew
music
up in Wisconsin, just next door. But yes,
Gotcha.
yes. Mhm.
Gotcha. Why do you think? Okay, so obviously, Minneapolis. I think it's like an underrated music scene, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, Prince, but Lizzo's from there.
Yep.
You have, Zoll Asylum. What makes Minneapolis like such an American like musical jewel, Ari?
The winters. It's so cold that we all kind of we have this camaraderie and we can kind of pull it together because it's one of the only places in the country where if it's negative 20 degrees below zero and blizzarding, people will still go out and see live music. I mean, it's the
Mm,
most incredible thing I had never experienced anywhere else. I mean, in LA, where I am now, if there's a light drizzle, half the city shuts down and nobody leaves their house. So
yeah,
it's
same here in
quite a different
Nashville. Yeah.
thing. But yeah, Minneapolis, honestly, it was one of my favorite parts about being in that scene there was the music community. It was so supportive and everyone really kind of came together and it was definitely it was such a wonderful experience being there growing up musically in that city.
Unbelievable, Larry. Love it, and we love your mission. That's another thing we love about you. I mean, part of it is it's so important, and it's just to empower other musicians, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's putting the spotlight the way we can, we also like to do that, even if it's a little bit. But um, I mean, so many directions we can go here. But let's start with the academy. Let's
Sure.
start with the low hanging fruit. Obviously, Ari's Take Academy. Love the concept. How was it conceived, and what's the goal there, Ari, for my audience?
Sure. So, for those of you who don't know, so I started Ari's Take the blog. It was a music business advice blog in 2012. That was basically sharing tips that I was learning running my own music career for other musicians because I don't believe in competition in the music industry. I believe that a rising tide lifts all ships. And
Mm,
I was seeing a lot of my friends in music getting taken advantage of by managers, labels, promoters, club owners. And I was learning a lot by running my own music career, and having a lot of successes here and there. And people were asking me how I was doing that. And so I tried to get back to everybody, and I did it for a time. But then word spread. If you have questions about the music business, go ask Ari. That's why I launched the blog. And so I just started sharing everything I was learning. I put it up on
love
the
it.
blog. The blog kind of took off, and it turned into the book deal. And so then the book was based on everything that I was learning, but also the hundreds of interviews that I had given over the years to the movers and shakers in the industry. Whenever I would sit down with anyone in the industry, especially because most musicians don't get an opportunity to pick the brains of some of the most powerful people in the industry, I felt it
Sure.
was my duty and responsibility as like the representative of all musicians to ask them the questions that like every musician has, but
Amazing.
nobody actually has the access to ask these people these questions, the hard questions, the real questions. And so I would always ask these questions. I gathered all the information, and that's what I put into the book. And then when the book came out, it is now been widely adopted
Oh
by
yeah, it's been double
yeah.
published, right? I mean, bestseller.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, second edition now, and
Second edition. Yeah.
most music universities are teaching it these days, which is amazing, and I love to see. But musicians came to me after they read the book, and they're like, "Yeah, this has been so helpful. I really appreciate the book. I've learned so much. I'm looking for a bit more hands-on guidance. Is there, anything?" That you can help me with, and I don't have time to do consulting anymore.
Right.
And it also, because my book is taught in so many universities there, I've spoken at a lot of colleges around the country. um, and the thing that was so challenging for me when I was there is I would when I would pop into these music business classrooms, I usually sit at the back and listen to the teacher teach talk for a little bit before I would give up and give my spiel.
Mm,
And I found that so many of these schools were just outdated in what they were teaching, and the teachers there were so detached from the
Yeah.
current music industry. Like, they may have been deeply in the music industry 20 years ago, but they weren't on the ground today, and so they weren't up to date with what was happening. And it was frustrating to me that all these kids were graduating 100, $200,000 in debt, had no career
And
prospects,
the
didn't even,
information is, yeah,
and the information they
irrelevant.
learned was outdated. And so a lot of times they would come to me, and when I was doing consulting sessions, they'd hire me to consult them on like basic stuff like royalty collection that they should have learned in school. I'm like, what did you spend
Yeah.
$150,000 on
Yeah.
if they didn't teach you how to collect your royalties? So I was like, it was so frustrating. So I decided that I needed to launch an alternative education platform institution where not only are our instructors experts in the field right now currently doing it. Like, we don't hire teachers, we don't hire professors, we
The
hire
doers.
experts in the industry. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so they teach. And then our main goal is that our students, who are musicians and managers, can implement what they learn immediately, and that it will advance their careers right away. And we are actually now working with placement. We're getting our artists signed to
Unbelievable.
agencies, and we have direct placement. So it's very important to me and to all of us that work at Ari's Take, that we are not just getting students into the program. The more important thing is that we're seeing that they are becoming successful from what we're offering and what we're teaching.
I love it. Ari, you're like unbelievable. What you're doing is so important. It's
Thank
crazy.
you.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. And let me ask you about this as well, just
Sure.
before we get to to the new music, which is great, by the way. Um,
Thank you.
I think part of the conversation that's really taken off with this pandemic has been the streaming thing, right? Because
Mhm.
touring revenue disappeared, and artists started making the math, and they're like, wait, for every 1 million streams we're getting
Right.
how much, right?
Right. Right.
Because we're getting $500 per
Mhm.
1 million streams if we're lucky, if it's like the high end streaming services. um I'm sorry, $5,000. What do you make of this conversation, and like I mean the future of streaming, right? Like,
Mhm.
people in Tokyo can listen to your song right now, Ari, but that doesn't monetize, basically.
Sure. So you're right. I mean, the access is now greater than ever. The 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 thing about streaming these days, where I think there's a lot of confusion, is that we're looking at the paper, like the calculation you just did, the pay per stream. We're like, well, it's about a half a penny per stream. It's actually a little bit less than that. But that's not the right way to look at streaming, as how much are you earning per stream, because that's the traditional mindset of how it used to be. Whereas before, you had to convince people to buy your music. So fans would purchase music in the past. It was, they would hear a song on the radio, they liked the song enough, they became a fan of that song. So then they're like, you know what, I want to learn more about this artist. They would drive to the record store, they'd buy the CD because they were a fan of the song first, maybe the artist. Or on the more indie level, they would go to a show, they'd see a show, they'd love the show. So now they're a fan of that artist. They would go to the merch table, they would buy the CD. They were a
Yeah,
fan. That was the,
yeah,
now we flipped that completely on its head. It's no longer that you need to be a fan of an artist to actually put money in that artist's pocket. Because here's the difference. Now artists are getting paid on streams from people who are not fans of them.
mm,
That's never happened before.
interesting.
So yes, if the only, so if we were living in a bubble, in a vacuum, and we're like, man, I have 1,000 fans, and the only thing that they're gonna way that they can pay me is through streaming on Spotify, and that's gonna pay me about a third or so of a penny per stream. It's like, there's no way to live on that. Absolutely. If the only audience that you have are your current fan base, and if the only way to monetize that current fan base was streaming, which is not the case, there are so many more monetization efforts and opportunities out there other than streaming. But
Right.
that's not the case. The
Mm,
thing is that we're living in an era where there are artists, independent artists, who are getting millions and millions and millions and millions of streams that cannot sell 50 tickets to their hometown show.
mhm.
Now, how is that possible? It's possible because of playlists,
Yeah,
because people are listening to playlists, And on the playlist, they don't know the artist they're listening to. It's like when
No.
you turn on the radio station. It's like when you turn on pop radio. It's like, man, I love pop radio. And it's like, wow, who do you love? It's like, I don't know. I just love the radio station. It's the same with playlists. It's like,
Yeah,
I love the chill out playlist while I'm studying. I love the, your favorite
it's
coffee
true.
house. And so the thing is, it's like, sure, there's a lot of songs on that playlist by a lot of artists that the listeners of that playlist don't know and never heard of and are not going to buy tickets to their shows. So you're like, well, why is that helpful to anybody? Well, those artists are getting paid for all those streams. Previously, if you had a song on the
Mm.
radio, yes, it was great exposure, but as the artist, you're not making any money from that radio
Interesting.
play. As a songwriter, yes, but that's a different conversation. But now people are getting paid for their music being listened to without even having fans. So like I said before, you had to have fans who would
Yeah,
choose to purchase your music.
sure.
Now you're getting paid without actually having the fans. So the thing is that yes, if you don't get on those playlists, yes, it's a totally different conversation, and getting on playlists is a whole other topic we could take up an entire hour
Yeah.
with. We're not going to
Oh
touch
yeah.
on now. But it's I push back when people say you can't make money on streaming, because Spotify actually came out last year and said that there are over 43,000 artists, the vast majority of them independent, no labels, that are making a full living just on Spotify royalties. We're not even talking
Wow.
Apple Music. We're not even talking about anybody else. We're talking just Spotify said 43,000 artists. That's more individual musicians in the history of the music business that are
Yeah.
making a living from streaming these days. So when you just look at, you point to one person and you're like, oh, well, that person, they're not making a lot of money. It's just like, well, okay, sure, that person, but I could also point to 43,000 other people who are, and a lot of them are friends, and I've seen this, and it's like,
Yeah.
the people who are speaking out against Spotify and the people who are the loudest are not the ones that are seeing the wins from this. And those people stay quiet because they're happy with what's happening. But the
Mm.
thing is like, so there's definitely two conversations that are happening right now. And I think the loudest one that is kind of monopolized the conversation in the industry is the one that isn't really helpful to the advancement of the new music
Right.
business and helping artist careers. And I'm always looking for ways that I can help musicians and thrive. And I'm not there's way too many people that are all doom and gloom. I'm not doom and gloom. I'm very realistic. I will say, yes, it's very challenging for people that don't get anointed by Spotify and they don't get on the playlist, but it's possible. And I could highlight 1,000 of those cases too.
Interesting. Oh, I love that perspective. I gotta tell you, Ari, like that's a completely fresh angle that you just gave my audience, right? Because everyone
Yeah.
is like, oh, Silicon Valley, the boogeyman.
Right.
So anyway,
Mhm.
let's talk about the music. I mean, home, Ari. I mean, the heart of your new project is the idea of home. I loved it, Ari.
Thank
What
you.
is home, Ari? And I relate to some of it because I went through a divorce last year, March of last year. What have you discovered home is for you, Ari?
Yeah, so this album, I recently released the title track "Like Home," and yeah, the whole album is, it was inspired because I had a breakup from an 11-year relationship, and we had built a home together, and I think in moving out and starting my own new place, it kind of challenged my idea of what home means. And is it a physical location? Is it a family? Is it someone you share shelter with? Um, can it just is it just a feeling? So I explored that, and a lot of these songs were, this is how I processed kind of um my new beginnings in my new home. And I went through a lot of, the challenges, um and just kind of uh figuring out how I was feeling about everything through songwriting. And
Yeah.
the thing is like, I have a therapist who's amazing, but I realized through that process is like, therapy for me is all head, but to understand what I'm really feeling, that's through songwriting. And the only way that I can actually process my emotions and really reveal some truths about me, and ideally about, just the world that I'm experiencing, is through songwriting. And so, through the writing process of this record, I wrote over 40 songs, just
Amazing.
going through the process. And then I took the six most meaningful ones, that I guess helped me tell the most complete story of this process for me,
Right.
and revealed this idea of what home can mean, and I packaged it into this album, like home. Yeah.
Unbelievable. It's such a powerful story with a happy ending as well for you, Ari. Um, let me, you've been so generous with your time. Let me ask you one more question about the
Sure.
songwriting. You touch on it. Um, the other day, the British Americana singer Yola said, you know, when people say that songwriters write the best, or artists in general are the best when they're in most pain, kind of false. That's what she said, because you know, the reality is it's after, like after you've had time to process it, but during, it's like a goddamn nightmare. You can barely move a finger. Was this kind of like your experience, like, or were you like in the midst of this, like were you
Yeah.
actually able to get the pen to paper?
I- so I think every songwriter and every artist operates differently, and that might be their experience. That's not my experience. My experience is that when I'm in the throes of it, I need to write, otherwise I do go insane. So,
Mm,
and maybe that's just my personality type, or maybe that's just how I process or work. But um, I went through it while writing. I had to write to
nice.
get through it. So like if I didn't write, uh I would either suppress it and then it would manifest in other more dangerous ways, or it would just be something that would debilitate me and I wouldn't be able to do anything, and that's not productive or helpful for me.
Sure.
So I intentionally wrote to process. I carved out a lot of writing time. Um, yes, I run a business right now and I have employees to look after and everything, but writing was so important to me that I carved out a day a week where I shut off everything,
Everything.
and I just wrote. And a lot of the times I didn't write songs that anybody needed to hear. They were kind of just for me processing, but um I I would say after the year of writing, I came out stronger, more complete, and I feel like I had kind of was able to move on because of that year of writing, and I felt very healthy after that process. So for me, that's how I got through it, and when I was actually in it, I was writing.
Amazing. Well, listen, Ari, you've been so good with your time. You've said it all. I mean, what a great
Thank you so
project. What
much.
a great guy. Amazing guest. We'd love to have you back at some time. You just killed it. A
Thank
lot
you.
of thought provoking, new, fresh ideas. So thanks for sharing them with our audience.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And safe trip out to New York.
Thank you.
Stay warm out there, Ari. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.